Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, no matter where you are in the world. Welcome to the podcast live. It is the 14th day of the month of June. I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to welcome my guest, Mark Herschberg. What's happening, Mark?
Hey, thanks for having me on, and thank you to your audience for giving me some of your time.
Awesome, and welcome everybody who's joining us in the live stream, joining us on the replay, joining us on the audio podcast. So before we get started, Mark, I kind of had a revelation last week that it's time to change things up a little bit, right? And I think that's going to kind of be a theme of what we talk about in your expertise as far as careers too. But I've been doing this live show consistently since November 2019. And I do a lot of them during the daytime. And I've experimented and done a couple at nighttime. And I've been toying around with the idea. And I think I'm going to move forward. Starting in the fall, the podcast is going to move to twice a month nighttime. What do you think? You think that might work?
I think Jimmy Kimmel better watch his back.
Exactly. And just so everyone knows, this will be the last podcast live until I think the 19th of July. I'm taking a little bit of a hiatus to recharge, refresh, and clear the cobwebs out. So let's get started here. My man Mark and I were talking a little bit before about this incredible bookcase behind him, and I noticed that Edison light bulb behind him. Mark, what is that? What is that light bulb for? How'd you get your hands on that?
So that came from one of my companies. We won an Edison Award for innovation. And this was one of the table settings. And it was just they bought these giant light bulbs for Edison. So at the end, they're just going to throw them out. I thought, this is kind of awesome. Everything on my bookshelf relates to something that's important to me. The night from my consulting company, White Knight Consulting, but the light bulb, the symbol of inspiration. Thought, that's a really good thing that I want to just have in my life to remind me to be creative and be inspirational.
I love it. It's interesting too what people have in their backgrounds here. I mean, it's your show. I'm not going to talk about it, but I have things up here that I love. A picture of my family. I have my Ghostbusters Lego. I got my Bob Hope bourbon bottle from 1968. Like all these things that are really important to me. But enough about that. Let's get right to it. So, Mark, a lot of the folks out here don't know you. So why don't you give us a quick little insight into who you are and what you do best?
Yeah, my background came out of MIT in the 90s, started my career as a software developer, and I built a number of tech startup companies, a lot of enterprise companies, so you might not have heard of them. So I've been a CTO at these companies. But when I realized I wanted to become a CTO, I realized that meant having skills, not just programming, but leadership, communication, negotiation, all these skills no one taught me. So I had to develop it myself. And it turns out these skills are universal. Everyone needs them. So corporate America told MIT, we want to see these skills in your students, in fact, all our employees. And I've spent the last 20 years teaching a course at MIT known as the Career Success Accelerator, where we're teaching these skills to MIT students. And so I recently released a book that contains many of those great topics that's now available for everyone.
That's awesome. I'm going to link everyone to that book in a little bit. And it's kind of like that aha thing. Like, you know, kids come out of college and they're not taught a lot of these real life in the workforce type of things. Luckily for me, I had the opportunity. I had a bunch of really good internships when I was in university. So I learned in an office a lot of those things that you never learn in college. I learned how to interact. I learned how to engage. I learned the proper etiquette and politics in an office. But there's a lot of those other kind of soft skills. Let's kind of go through what are some of those big skills that are not being taught at the university level, and people coming into the workforce are like, where was that class? How come I didn't get that? I didn't get that memo.
The 10 skills that we've identified, and they're in the book, is 10 chapters, 3 sections. First section, creating a career plan, how to figure out where you want to go, how to create and refine and execute on how to get there. Second, how to be effective in the office, politics that you mentioned, managing your manager, corporate culture. Third is interviewing, not just as a candidate, but also as you move up, you're going to be involved in hiring, learning how to hire other people. So important. Then you have leadership and management skills. Those skills, I break it down to people management and process management. Those skills aren't just for people with senior titles. All of us from day one can use leadership skills, can use management techniques to be more effective. And then the last section, communication, negotiation, networking, and ethics.
So MIT, did they approach you, or you're like, yeah, MIT's calling. This is probably going to be a good gig. I should listen to them.
I had built this type of training internally at my organizations once I realized how important these skills were. And shortly thereafter, I heard MIT was looking to do the same. So I reached out to them and offered to help. So that was me reaching out to them. But they liked my insights and said, well, we have these brilliant professors. You bring a different set of experience being in the workplace, right? Just like you learn these from the workplace. So they decided they want to get myself and other people like me to help teach the class.
And it's really interesting too, because this is you're not a career coach per se. You're not a resume writer, but what you're doing is you're taking all these years of real leadership, C-level experience, and you're distilling it down and making it in a way where folks can understand it, and they could go to each different piece that they might need. Maybe they don't need to read the whole book. Maybe they need to go to one chapter or another, but it's digestible. So let's start with the beginning, career planning. Like, do you have to have a career plan? Isn't it one of those things that like, hey, listen, get out there, go try something and see if you like it or not? Why is it so essential to have a career plan early on?
If your manager asks you to do a project, would you ever say, okay, great, but I'm not going to bother creating a plan for it. I'm just going to go wing it and hopefully it will work out, right? Totally unacceptable. So you want to create that plan. Now we know with our plans for work projects as well as our career, we're never going to follow the plan exactly. And it's okay to change it. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't like this plan anymore. New end goal. But wherever you're going, you want to have that regular check-in. Even just once a year, sit down for an hour or two. How am I doing? I said I'm going to develop these skills this year. Did I develop them? Do I need to put more work into it? Or is it time to go do something else? So having that plan leads you to your goal. Having a plan doesn't guarantee success, but not having it almost guarantees failure.
You know, and I like that too. And I think it's about kind of accountability, self-accountability. Am I following the right path? Am I progressing the way I want? And I think it's okay to have a plan B at certain times in your career. I mean, I talk about it a lot now where I don't have a plan B at the stage that I'm at. And that's fine because I've gotten to a point where I'm all in on what I'm doing. But especially folks, you know, younger. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, that younger career. What was, you know, at the point where you're at now in your life and in business and success and everything, and you could look back, you know, I'm not going to date you by age right now, but if you could look back to a couple of those early jobs, the early stage in your career, what's one of those big lessons that you could see now that you didn't know then that you wish you knew when you put into the book?
One of the early ones, I was at a company and I noticed that there were a lot of meetings with the senior leaders. Didn't quite know why. It wasn't just their weekly meeting, but a lot of these meetings were going on. I didn't pay attention to it. Turned out a few months later, it was because there was a falling out between the founders. They wound up suing each other in court, and the company split in two.
Good times.
Now, I wound up okay. Both of the companies offered me jobs. In fact, this is where I first said, how do I figure out which one is right for me? But it could have turned out much worse. And if I had been smarter and paying attention to what's happening in the office, I could have gotten out in front of it and maybe even capitalized better on it.
So let's unpack that for a little bit. I think a lot of young folks and even more senior folks too are kind of either intimidated or purposely stay out of the workplace politics. Why could it actually be a benefit, as kind of you're alluding to here, to kind of have a little bit more of that ear to the ground of what's actually happening at that senior level?
First, it doesn't have to be politics per se. We think
politics sometimes gets a bad word. I mean, there's a positive and dispositive politics in the office.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about a non-politic approach and then why politics are actually useful.
Floor is yours, Mark.
We think about networking for, I have to build a network to go find a new job. People don't think about internal networking, building up those networks within the company so you have your ear to the ground, so you hear about risks and opportunities and ways you can even help and provide more value. So all of us, independent of politics, you want to build that internal network and be aware of what's going on.
Tremendous.
But for politics, to your point, politics, it's just like in the US. Well, politics does some wonderful things. We have made the world better. We've also at times made it worse, right? It can go either way. In the office, there are people who use politics badly, but you can also use politics well. The political spectrum is just people who approach things differently. Those of us on one side, and this is the side I happen to be on, are very, let me just do my job. If I do it well, people say good work, and that's what's important. People who are on the other side tend to be more relationship focused. And Adam, I've known him for years. If Adam says this is the way to go, I'm a busy exec. I don't have time to drill into it. I trust Adam's judgment. That's more on the other side of the spectrum.
Relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, it's so funny. I am honored to be writing a chapter in a book from my good friend Scott McGregor, his Standing O series. And I'm writing about the 7 key mentors in my life. And one of them that's most important is my time over at Sirius XM satellite radio. It was like kind of mid-career at that point. And my boss at the time, Debbie, the first day I was there, she took me around for the first 2 hours. We're talking 3 giant New York City corporate floors, and introduced me to everybody that she knew. She used it as an opportunity to introduce me to people that she didn't know. And she taught me on that day the value of those inter-office relationships. And the most important one were the facilities and maintenance guys, the janitors.
Yes.
I never had a problem getting a new office chair. Something's broken in my office. I need help getting something up the freight elevator. Like, it starts everywhere within an organization. That's something I teach to everybody, that true power.
And that's a really important lesson about how everyone, not just people with titles, the way I had my grad school paid for, I wanted to become a teaching assistant. So I went to a professor's office and he gave me the runaround. I was like, oh, I don't do that. You have to go to headquarters, the department. So I went to department. They said, yeah, I don't know why he said that. He gets to pick. I'm like, great. He blew me off. But as I was waiting to go into his office, I was chatting with his secretary. And I was nice to her, and we were talking, and I mentioned I had done some other work. She said, oh, I'll make sure to make a note. My guess is he eventually was told by a secretary, by the way, that list is due today. He hadn't thought of that. He said, do you have anyone? Probably asked her. And my name was on it because I was nice to her.
And that's one of these secret tips. I mean, obviously, it's not a secret to be nice to everybody, but like people ask me all the time, like, how do you book certain guests on your show? I go, I am extremely overly gracious and communicative with people's assistants, right? You're not just using them as a doormat to get into, that big guest that you want, but you treat people the right way and things start to open up. It's wow. Oh my God. I can't believe what a crazy concept. But shockingly, a lot of people don't. And it starts with relationships. I want to go back to a piece in your book about negotiating the job offer, because I think this is very interesting and timely, especially right now. And we're seeing a lot of things in the pandemic, and we'll get to that. We're seeing a lot of counter offers being accepted because, you know what? People are saying, hey, it's easy money. I'll take this extra 15, 20%, keep the same job and not have to go anywhere, because I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to go into the office and look at my boss in the eye and know that he knew that I was leaving. A lot of that is out the window. But let's kind of get back to some of those fundamentals. I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, because you're the expert. Negotiating is an extremely hard thing for most people to do because it doesn't come naturally. It's putting you in a very uncomfortable situation. A lot of people don't like to talk about money. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know how to truly advocate for themselves and understand leverage. What are you seeing, and what's your perspective and approach?
Negotiating is actually really natural because all of us at age 3 said to our parents, I don't want to eat more carrots. And I said, well, eat a few more to have dessert, and we negotiated our bedtime or
you know what? You're right. My 3-year-old literally is the most hardcore negotiator ever. Yeah, he's writing the next Trump book. Yeah.
So we can do it. We just lost that skill. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of it, but it's easy to pick up. And here's the secret. Imagine, let's suppose you have a job offer for $70,000. If you went and said, I'm going to learn to negotiate, I'm going to go and ask for $1,000 more. That's not a lot of money, right? We could certainly get that. If in that one minor negotiation, you got $1,000 more, if you sat in that job for 30 years, you just got $1,000 for 30 years. You got $30,000 from one 5-minute negotiation. But of course, you'll have other jobs. You'll have other promotions and raises. If you learn to negotiate, it's not about being the best negotiator in the world. It's not hostage negotiation for the FBI. Just learn to be a little bit better. Read a book, take a class. You're going to add tens of thousands, more likely hundreds of thousands of dollars to your lifetime earning. And we're just talking about salary. You can negotiate other things.
Title.
You negotiate with your coworkers all the time on projects. Everything is going to come out slightly better, and that has a huge impact on your career.
It's tough too when people don't know when to step up and they don't know what is the best time. A lot of people think they sit back and should just wait for that, annual performance review. But when is the best time to negotiate?
You want to do it typically after you've accomplished something well, but also think about it from the other party's perspective. If your boss is having a very stressful, difficult time, and you show up and say, hey, let's talk about my raise, bad time for your boss. This is why annual reviews are a good natural time, because people are expecting it. And realistically, if that means waiting another 4 months, when you think about, oh, $10,000, that's the raise I want, but over 4 months, it's really only 1/3. So that's $3,000 some dollars. And after taxes, you know what? Wait a few months for the better timing.
Yeah, that's an important one. So I want to talk a little bit about I want to talk about managing teams, and I want to talk about leadership, because they do go hand in hand. And I think that there's two things here. One, I don't think that everybody is meant to be a people leader. There's some people that are great at just being workers, individual contributors, creators, and they're just not. And that's a problem in a lot of companies that I've seen, that they feel the only way to give people promotions is to put people underneath them. And I think that's very ineffective. I think great organizations truly understand that you could promote somebody and you don't have to build a team around them if you don't think that's right. But then there's a lot of folks who are starting to be people leaders young in their career. And I think that they're not getting trained well. They're not being put in a position where they're learning from good people leaders. So what are you seeing out there? And what are some of these fundamentals that anybody could take as far as learning how to manage teams effectively and efficiently? And then we'll get into leadership.
You're absolutely right. The biggest transition we do in our career is that first management role. Because as an individual contributor, as you become more senior, you start to do more and more and more, but it's more of the same. And here suddenly it's a different type of work. It's not just solving the problems, it's leading the team, it's managing the team to solve the problems. And they don't do any training, and that is so unfortunate. So recognize when you are about to become a leader, when you want that job, even beforehand, start to read books, take classes, do training, listen to great podcasts like this one, and begin to hone those skills so you're ready. And then, of course, keep doing that even once you have the role, because it is really tricky. But if you get it right, then it just gets easier as you go further up.
I mean, what were some of the common mistakes that you've seen and that you've even made yourself early in your career when you were managing and leading people?
One of the most common things is the hero mentality. I was this great individual performer. I could brute force it or just work harder and figure it out. And now I'm leading a team of 8. And, oh, you know what? It's not working. Okay, same thing. I'm just going to work harder.
Do more.
I just can't do that at an 8x factor. So I have to learn to get others to get the answer and not just rely on me.
It's interesting, too. And I think another big piece about leadership or leading people is getting feedback, 360 feedback from your team and being open to it and creating an environment and culture where that's okay. I mean, I do with my team now. I have a bunch of folks that work with me, and I always say to them, hey, what could I do better? How could I help you more? How could I be a better asset to you guys? Because ultimately, I always tell folks that come onto my team, I'm here to be the bad cop. I'm here to provide air cover for you. I'm here to support you and keep things moving along here. So you let me know how I can help you. And if you're not telling me, I'm not going to have any idea. So I think that communication is important, but you have to create that environment. And I've seen it before too, where you could have folks that are reporting to you and you say that to them and they're like, is this a trick?
Right. One thing I do is 2 months in, I ask for a volunteer from the group of people I'm managing. And I say, here's what we're going to do. I want to get your feedback. I want you to tell me good, bad, anything I need to know. And here's the one person, Alice. She's the one who's going to collect it all. So everyone tell Alice. So when Alice sits down with me, I know, oh, it's not Alice. It's not, oh, Alice, how dare you tell me?
It's a consensus. Yeah, it's anonymous.
It's anonymous. So it gives them protection and they can sincerely give me feedback.
And all these pieces are really key to building up someone's leadership. What would you say are the key skills? We'll talk hard skills, soft skills, to being a good people leader, to being a good leader.
To being a good leader, it is recognizing leadership doesn't come from position. Too many people think a leader has this title, a leader can command. That's positional leadership. True leadership is influential leadership and is about putting forth a vision. Now that vision could be Gandhi saying, let's create a new country and break free of the British. Or it could be, you know what, we need to build the product, a smaller, better consumer version instead of a larger, more enterprise version. Whatever it is, you have a vision about what the future should be, and then convincing people this is the direction to go in. That is the essence of leadership.
Love it.
Now, of course, to do that, you need to be able to think through the problem, communicate it well, coalition build. There's a whole bunch of things underneath. But that is the essence of leadership, is not authority and commanding.
Let's go back to coalition building because I don't think that's talked about enough. If you wouldn't mind unpacking that for folks out there who might not know what it is. I've heard that a lot. I know what it is, but I'd love if you could share your expertise.
If I have an idea for where the company should go, let's say I want to launch a new division. I think this is going to be brilliant. We're going to get all sorts of new customers, help the company. This is what we should do. Okay, so I put forth the plan and I've got these great ideas and here's why the financials will work out and all this. But HR is thinking, hey, we have our own initiatives and now you want us to staff up this new organization. The CFO says, oh, this is going to put a crunch on our cash flow and really the board wants something else. I might be creating problems for them. Even if it's right in the long term, how does it affect them at a smaller level? So what I need to do is reach out to each of the parties affected, people who I want to join the team or people who might be just impacted by our decisions. How do I listen to their needs, take their needs into account, maybe adjust the plan so I turn them into an ally and not someone who just says, this is a problem for me.
Yeah, that's pretty important there. Where do you think most leaders fail, especially more senior in their career? Is it apathy? They kind of take the foot off the gas? Are they getting bored? I mean, where do you see a lot of leadership failures? Where's that breaking point?
They stop paying attention to the details. When they're sitting up here and they lose some of the details down here, what's working, what's not? Is this just a bump in the road or is it a signal of a larger problem? Really paying attention to the people, the process, the product. They're not paying that level of detail. And obviously they can't do it as much as someone at that level, but they need to have their own internal networks of what's really going on and not just that formal reporting structure.
No, 100%. So let's turn and we've got a few minutes left. I want to talk about the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected these core fundamentals that are in your book? How has it really affected it? And how much of that is, short term? Hey, listen, this is just, circumstance, situational, what's happening in the last 18 months. And how much of it is really going to be a game changer of how we do business moving forward into this new norm?
These skills are very fundamental and universal. So it's not as though, after a pandemic, it doesn't matter anymore. Now, in some cases, it changed a bit. So networking, everyone said, you can't network during the pandemic. The answer is, oh my God, this is a networking gift.
Of course it is.
Right. Most of us network to people locally. I was meeting people in New York. Now I could reach out to someone in London and say, hey, let's catch up. Let's do a video chat. Yeah. So you could
advantage of it.
Right. You could use it in different ways. And this is true of any crisis. It means change. It means difference. As we shift to semi-remote workforces, communication remains important, but how we communicate will be different. There's less dropping by your cubicle to have a talk. You have to be more intentional in your communication, but the nature of how you communicate and what you communicate, still important.
It's interesting. There was an article out on Bloomberg today that said, talking about a lot of the younger generational work in the generations in the workforce are actually really itching to get back. And we've heard different sides of this. I have my point of view. My whole point of view is around, a true hybrid choice, flexibility, because everybody's different jobs. I've heard from people that never want to step foot in the office again. They never want to commute. They never want to do anything. I get that. There's people that love going to the office. They love the camaraderie. They love being out of their house. Some people don't have the logistics. They're trapped with their villains at home, all these different reasons. How could leadership really do a good job at navigating this? Because sometimes there's no right answer. And sometimes they have other concerns. They have real estate investments. There's pieces that employees don't understand. Love to get your perspective on this as we bring it home.
As you point out, introverts versus extroverts, people who live close or far, young or old, everyone has different needs. So there's not going to be one answer. Now, unfortunately, there's a risk for companies. If you let people do different things, here's what happens. Women, who are usually the primary caregiver, have more demands at home, so they spend less time in the office. And what you're going to find in a few years is that the men are getting promoted more because they're spending more time in the office.
Yeah, this is a big one too. I've heard through the grapevine, and this is really interesting. We could talk for hours about this. That the working parent, and I'm going to be very broad on this one, the working parent, and yes, it's mostly mothers, have been at a real disadvantage from a career growth and performance perspective during the pandemic. This is what I've been hearing. They have to manage children at home all day long when those kids were at school. They're teachers, they're caregivers, and they're still trying to get their work done. They're still trying to make meetings. They're still trying to move things around. Are you seeing things similar? And I'm going to ask Gus about this too, who's in the green room. I see you there, Gus.
I've absolutely heard that, and it is unfortunate. As men, we need to step up and do our part to be caregivers and share it with our spouses. But we as society just need to recognize this, and businesses need to support that and not do things that could make it easier for women to continue to fall behind.
I mean, it's tough there too. I mean, if you think about it, there was, and there's always going to be competition in the workplace. There's always going to be someone trying to come up behind you. You're going to be trying to move up the ladder there too. And it's been a major disadvantage. How are companies trying to neutralize this? And how's this all being done remotely? I mean, there was so much value too also that in the office FaceTime, that's part of our office politics. I mean, we have to change the whole game is being changed right now.
And that's something that I think people aren't thinking about, the secondary effect when they're saying, well, I can work remotely. I can be on a beach halfway around the world and still get my work done. You can, but if you're not in the office, it's not going to help you with those promotions. If you're not going to the after work events in your city, that's not going to help you find your next job. So you might be able to do your current job, but you're going to limit your future prospects if you're not there at least part-time. I think
it comes down to us being a little bit more open. I think that there's going to be two polarizing extremes on everything here. There's going to be the hard line that say, I want to work from home forever. There's the people that want to go back to the office, and there has to be a happy medium on that. Gus, I'm going to pull you in here because Gus is doing something pretty cool. Gus, I'm giving you a 3-second heads up. I'm pulling you in live. Here we go. Gus Hattrich, what's happening, man?
How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I figured I'd pull you in here because you have a pretty unique perspective, and this is a live show, and I'll do my proper intro with you in a moment here. But I don't know, Mark, how much you know about Gus's story, what he's done as far as bringing people back to the workforce in person. So, Gus, if you wouldn't mind quickly sharing what you have done with your agency, and I'd love to get Mark's take on that because I think it's pretty cool.
Sure. In January of 2020, I was in a Raleigh-Durham airport, and I happened to pick up an article that was published by Yale University entitled "The Benefits of Eco-Psychology." And it was an article about being in nature. And what it was it talked about how being in nature reduces your stress hormones, it reduces your heart rate, your blood pressure, it actually improves your focus. And so that stuck with me. We started to go through COVID in 2020. Our company ironically had a very good year. We grew, we hired more people, things were going well, but I definitely felt this sense of sort of joylessness as we went through the year, especially after that initial adrenaline rush of the first 3 to 6 months sort of waned. And so I decided, looking back on that article, that we would develop a safe outdoor camp version of our office. So I leased 2.5 acres of space in suburban St. Louis County, and we created Camp Paradowski. And so what it was meant to do is it was meant for teams to physically connect, because I think I was listening to you and Mark, Adam, when you're talking about this battle, this giant war that we're talking about in bringing people back or not bringing people back. One of the things that I think is lost is that, I think, Adam, you're right. It's going to be different for everybody in different situations. But what is lost is some people are looking for a sense of community in their job.
Right.
They're looking for a creative community. It's very difficult to find that creative community if you can't find time together. And so camp was a chance for us to bring people together a number of days a week. We allowed them to be remote, going back and forth, but that was the basis of it. It was for those soft skills. It was not to do updates on Trello boards and change documents, but it was for the discussions that need to happen with each other to solve problems. And so that's what Camp Paradowski started. It started in April. We're still running it right now, although it's getting very warm. So we have to figure out our long-term game plan, which is an evolution of a new structure of our agency. But that's what it is.
And it's awesome because people have stayed connected, and they haven't. It's not like they're going back to the office after 18 months and being like, Mark, so good to see you. You look how great your hair has gotten in 18 months. So good to see your face. People are still seeing each other, Gus. They're still connecting, and that's huge. But let me finish up with Mark here for 1 minute, and we'll dive into your story. Mark, I appreciate you. Tell everyone where they can pick up the Career Toolkit. Where could they find it? Where could they learn more?
You can find it on Amazon or through your local bookstore. They can order it. If you go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com, you can get in touch with me, learn more about the book, download the free app for Android or iPhone, go to the resources page with lots of free information and downloads to help you develop the skills, all at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
It's fantastic. We'll link it up in the comments. We'll link it up in the show notes. Everyone check it out. Mark, let's continue this conversation offline. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, Mark. Gus, my man, what is happening in the great St. Louis?
It's hot. It's very hot here, Adam. It's warm, and Camp Paradowski is empty as we speak right now because it's just too darn hot to be out in the sun. So
Are are you a Cards fan?
I am a Cards fan. I'm sorry. I always used to have to say that. I have to apologize with that, but
Why?
I'm a huge Cardinals fan. So
You should be proud of that. I'm a huge Mets fan. I don't hate the Cardinals. I mean, we got Keith Hernandez from the Cardinals, one of my
that's
favorite
right.
players of all time. I have his
That's
autograph
right.
book sitting right on my shelf over there. Thank you, Scott McGregor. And I love baseball and I miss baseball. And I think next year there's a few stadiums I want to go to that I've never been to. I want to go to St. Louis. I want to go to Milwaukee. And there was a third one. I forgot the other one. Oh, and I'm going to go to Wrigley finally for the first time.
Well, I would gladly host you at a Cardinals game. I'd love to have you and give you the full Cardinals experience.
I would love that too. So what really jumped out to me when we connected and we're talking about coming on the show is that you are a career ad guy, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
And I spent the first 15 of my years of my career before I got into recruiting for advertising and marketing, working in advertising and marketing as an account guy, strategist, account management, account leadership. And I think for the purposes of this conversation, why it's so important to me, I'm hearing this a lot in our world, that the creative industry has really been suffering from the lack of connectivity, physical connection. There are parts of our industry that can be done remotely, but creativity, it's that human connection. It's that human energy that's been missing. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your background and how important that concept is as someone who's been in this industry for such a long time.
Well, my background starts with the idea that my father was in this business. He worked for Flashman Hillard, which is a very large public relations firm. He then went on to start his own agency. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2004. And when he passed away, at his wake, I got the chance to meet and talk to a lot of people over the years that he spent a career working with. And I took away from that was that no one ever brought up the great project that they worked on with my father, but they talked about the stories and the times together in the hilarity of just bad traveling incidents and all sorts of other stuff.
Like a
And
John
and it's
Candy movie, right?
and it struck me, yeah, I mean, it struck me as that's the important part of this business. The important part of this business is the journey, right? It's the relationships that you make. And I think that it's really hard to make have those meaningful relationships when it's fully remote. And I also think there tends to be a war right now between these factions of everybody should be back in the office full time, or everybody should be remote. We've proven we can do it. I don't think that's right. I think I think it depends on where you are on your own personal
What
professional
industry?
journey.
There's so many factors involved in this.
Yeah, so that's where it started for me. I worked at a big agency in the IPG network called the Zipatoni Company in the late '90s, early 2000s. I started another agency with another partner in the early mid 2000s, and then I joined on to the Paradowski the couple, Alex and Nala Paradowski, who had started this business 45 years ago. I joined on with them in 2011, and it was really important for me to address culture first, and figuring out how to build a creative community that I really wanted for my career.
Interesting too. And how many folks are in the firm right now? Let me look.
I think we're about 110. That changes pretty regularly for the positive as we've grown a lot in the last year.
And what's interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I feel comfortable saying this, that 100-person agency size is a nice size where it's kind of, you could know everybody or most people. You know, it's a size where you could walk the hallways, where you could walk the building and go into different departments, and most of the people here, or you at least know them by face, and there's a connection there.
Oh, absolutely. I think that what's been really hard is that we hit that 100-person mark during COVID,
Mm.
and we just lost any capacity to do that. And I think it's very, very difficult to make those meaningful connections when it's just purely on screen all the time. And so I'll tell you, admittedly, if this were 2019 and we had 100, I would feel wonderful about the people that we have and being able to say that I know each of them personally, but I don't. There are people that I haven't gotten to know very deeply because our exchanges have been purely virtual up to this point, up until camp started.
So let's talk about the camp here. And you mentioned before where the idea kind of came from. When was that kind of aha moment, like during the pandemic? How early on was that? And let's talk about how you implemented it. And was that it's like a 10-part question here. Like when you kind of laid out the plan, were there naysayers? Were there people like, Gus, that's a terrible idea?
No, I think I think what we discovered was that we kept on winning business. I mean, genuinely, we were doing pretty well. And at the end of 2020, when we felt like there was starting to be light at the end of the tunnel in terms of vaccine and maybe a return to normalcy was going to happen in 2021. I just think that there was something that happened simultaneous where there was somewhat of an exhale about, man, I think we've
Hmm.
made it through this, but at the same time, an emptiness on like, I don't know how much longer I can keep being locked in my house or away from other people. And so I wanted to, I could sense it. I could sense it in meetings. I could sense it in
You
my
felt it.
direct,
It's an energy. It's an energy.
yeah. And so I had wanted to do this for a while. I mean, I had joked with coworkers that I wanted to send everybody to camp for quite a long time, just so we could see all the, the different sides of ourselves outside of in an office environment. And so when we did it, I started to plot it out with a smaller group of people in the company, and they were all very excited about it. And most people that once we launched it, people were really excited. I'll tell you, Adam, the thing that was really striking was how emotional it was the very
I
first
was
day we were there.
I was about to say, so let's do a little bit of a timeline here. When was the last day of everybody in the office?
March 13th, 2020.
I know that was my wife and I's 10-year wedding anniversary, and literally we call it the day of that was we had a makeup anniversary. It was all good. 11 was great. So you pulled everyone out of the office. How long until you got the camp rolling and everyone, well, not everyone, until the first group came in?
First group came, I mean, we got everybody back at camp. I think it was the second to last week of April of
Wow, it's quick.
2021. Yeah. Well,
2021.
no, 2021. So we were a full year remote. And then in April of 2021 was when we launched camp.
Got it. So it's been a full year, and now you get everyone back
Full
because
year.
you had to hold the camp together. Talk to us a little bit about the when you made the, I mean, I assume that a lot of people in the company, if not everybody, knew that this was happening at a certain point. They were building it. Tell us about like that feeling. Was it like really something? Because I know if I was in your organization, if I was working at your agency, I'd be like, hell yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait for this camp to open. I can't wait to see my coworkers that I've been missing. And you're going there, as you mentioned, under the premise that we're not going there to do Trello boards and do actual work. We're going there to connect, to communicate, work on a lot of those soft skills. What was it feeling like as far as the energy and the culture? And how did you, what was that litmus test as a people leader, at the top, like making sure that this was going to feel right remotely?
Well, I think I would say that the energy I used our smaller task force to kind of check myself in terms of whether this was a good idea or bad idea. And I actually presented to them. I had a little presentation that I put together and said, here's what I know. I know that we added 20 new people on in the company in 2020. We've never met any of them in person yet. It's been
Right.
a year. I know that we've added, 8 new clients. We've done all these things. I'm sensing that there's a void. And I told them I felt the void. And I'm sure that others felt that void, and that we needed to find a way to slowly and safely bring people back together. And so I the cross the task force that I presented to was very much on board. And so they said, let's make this fun, and let's announce this as sort of a tease slowly to give people something to look forward to. So we started talking about it in late February, early March, and we launched a little microsite that was nothing more than a pair of binoculars in a
Hmm.
campground. And as you scrolled over different things with the binoculars, it played camp music, or it had different little Easter eggs in it.
It's so funny though. I'm laughing now because it makes me remember all the internal communications at all the agencies I ever worked at were the best. We even did my last agency, one of the agencies I loved, Irwin Penland, EP. If you're
Mhm.
familiar with them,
Sure.
Greenville, Carolina. We did a ping pong tournament, and the amount of effort the creative team went into building this tournament chart, and we did promotions for it. Like that's part of it. That's one of the
Sure.
cool things about ad life. So tell us, what was like the kind of executional idea of the camp? Give us a little bit of behind the scenes how it's going to work out. And it was, I assume it was optional, right? Like you didn't have to go.
Yeah, it was absolutely optional. And you're right. Agencies tend to put far too much effort into ping pong tournaments and other activities. But I think that one of the problems with our business now that we've lost over the decades has been we don't find the value of building our own brand and building equity in our own brand. So we will put people 40 hours a week trying to build equity for somebody else's brand, in which ultimately they may not stick with us down the road if they don't find
Right.
equity in our own brand. And so you have to do those things in order to sort of provide people some identity and thinking. And so, when we started it, we wanted it to feel like Wes Anderson. I'm a huge Wes Anderson
Oh
film
yeah.
fan, and so
Moonrise Kingdom.
we wanted it to. It's so funny you should say that, Adam. Our internal moniker to keep it hidden from other people was Operation Moonrise Kingdom, and so
I mean, I would have figured that out right away, Gus. I would be like, you're building a summer camp. You can't fool me. I mean, what a great movie, by the way. Oh, so good. There's a new one out that I didn't get to see yet. There's a hotel one or something.
I've not seen it either, I don't believe. So we planned it that way, and what we did was we wanted to make sure that social distance was still a thing, right? So we kind of charted out the grounds to keep smaller Adirondack chair style conference rooms 6 feet apart. Like, so we would put a group of 10 chairs together, all separate away from each other, to allow them to have those spaces to work and have discussions and whatever. And then we hired a guy who was like a chainsaw artist to carve a Camp Paradowski giant logo, and then these wooden stools in the center. And then we essentially decorated it with a number of tents throughout the campgrounds, and some large, some small, and then a flag. Of course, you have to have a camp flag.
Oh, of course.
And then we added a bunch of games, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
the thing that was lost in 2020 that I don't think people talk about enough. I feel like I've read every bad take in the New York Times and the Journal about how COVID has impacted businesses, but the one that I think is lost the most is the importance of play. So if you're in a creative profession, and you for a year have been told, we've got to figure out how to get this done. There's no margin of error. We're not together. We're not with the clients. You got to fly blind. We have to figure out how to make this happen. You lose the sense of play that's really important to problem solving. And so,
especially in the creative space too, that creative energy comes with play.
And we saw it the first few days of camp. People felt uncomfortable walking over and tossing a frisbee or playing a couple of the different games that we had set up. And so it was really important to us to have those games integrated in our campsite, because I wanted people to get back to a sense of recognizing that teamwork and being together and having fun and playing around is what ultimately can lead to some of our better creative solutions.
So how did you, from a protocol perspective, I mean, were people tested? I mean, how are you making people feel comfortable about coming to camp? So I get that question out of the way.
So we surveyed. Sure. We surveyed at the beginning, before camp started, about who had plans to get vaccinated, who had been vaccinated already, and who potentially was going to be vaccinated. And so thankfully in our company, by the time we had our first camp, we had over half of our company had been vaccinated. And then in a matter of weeks, it was into early May, most had at least one vaccination, if not all. And so we also told people if they weren't comfortable that they didn't come, that you should wear a mask if you wanted to wear a mask when we first launched camp. And then as time went on, and we followed the protocols of our local, local task force.
Right.
And so that's how we kind of handled it. But I will say that most all attended.
And tell us what it was like, when people finally came back for the first time and they were physically seeing each other. What was that energy? What did that feel like inside, Gus, as a agency, as a leader of this agency, as a coworker, a colleague? How did that feel?
Well, so the days leading up to camp were frenetic, as you would expect. It was the weekend. I had 3 or 4 people helping me build tents. and put out chairs and set up areas for different teams and have drinks and canteen area. And then that morning at about 7:20 or 7:30 in the morning, I was building the last tent by myself. And I remember two employees, Cindy and Hannah, came walking around a corner, and I hadn't seen them in 14 months. And
Crazy.
the first words out of their mouth were, "Do you need some help?" And at the time, it was a completely just a nice gesture, but I found myself choking back tears because it all kind of hit me at once how long it had been and how strange it had been to be away from these people that I had previously spent 40% of my year with.
Life.
And so it hit me hard. And that first day was nothing more than a lot of teary-eyed people seeing each other and having that sort of experience of just like, I can't believe that we're here right now. I can't believe all this has happened.
I mean, you have to hope and really hope that this moment in time in our lives, we're gonna truly remember what we didn't have, what we missed, and just not take that for granted and value it so much more and put it so much higher on a pedestal. All those things we took for granted, right? Those relationships.
Yeah, I think that there are things that we walked away from 2020 feeling like, okay, well, we made our business case for how it's possible to run a completely virtual agency, but we also made our business case for how negatively it can impact an entire culture, a creative community, you know? So, I don't want to say to you that we're not going to take things that we learned from 2020 and not use them. I think that what we discovered was allowing people more individual time to be hyper focused, whether it's in their house or a coffee shop or an art museum, is actually beneficial to the agency and
100%.
emotionally beneficial to them. But we were doing that prior to COVID. I mean,
There's a lot of functions at any organization where you have to be an individual contributor and laser focused on the task at hand. And let's call it what it is. Sometimes there are distractions. There's a lot of distractions in the office. So giving someone that flexibility to say, you know what, I got this project I'm going to work on. So today I'm going to be home. I'm going to be laser focused on this. Tomorrow I'll be in the office. I'll be shifting all my meetings, my team events together and blocking and tagging. It's just a new way of thinking. And you as a leader, how has this forced you to kind of maybe change some of the conventional ways that you were thinking about leading and managing people?
well, I mean, I think that we focus on three major pieces in our organization, and we have prior to COVID, and they become more important since. But the three areas that I think everything kind of funnels back through in terms of whether we're successful or not are creativity, partnership, and innovation. And so I think what we've discovered is that we were able to be creative. We were able to be good partners, and we probably had more breakthrough innovations in 2020 than in previous years. But I also think it changed my perspective on that a little bit, and knowing that um, I think we owe it to people. I mean, I personally feel a sense of not wanting to waste the time that we have on this planet as we
Yep.
move forward, and wanting to be respectful of the people in our company to do the same thing. Now you have to counterbalance that with our financial obligations of saying we've got to find clients, we have to do work, we have to pay the bills. But I also felt more emboldened than I probably have in a long time, just to say, are we happy? Is what you're doing making you happy? And are
That's
we doing the
huge.
kinds of things that are making us proud and happy?
That's an interesting one. So I'm curious. The way you organize it, was it done by groups, by teams? Did you kind of hodgepodge mix it up, shuffle it up a little bit, or did you intentionally bring it together with teams so the teams could get back together?
So we did both. So we set it up so teams could meet a couple of mornings a week by themselves, so they felt safer in lesser numbers. And then what we did is we started to have company events together to bring everybody together. So we had a guy named Serengeti Steve who brought snakes and alligators to camp. And he showcased a bunch of exotic animals, and we
That's
brought the
fun.
whole agency together for that. Or we had big lunches or dinners that were all safely catered for the group, for them to have those group activities. But then we also wanted them to do it by department to make sure that that connection was happening face to face Just because what we were discovering was just the fatigue of the 30-minute Zoom by death was really hard on our company.
And I want to dig into the creative piece. I have a good family friend. She's a senior level copywriter at a big pharma agency, and she said the creative collaboration is dying remotely. It's just sometimes just staring into an empty screen and not feeling inspired. Tell us from your perspective. I mean, your feedback from the creative folks about being together again.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting right now. I've had some discussions with most of the creative directors in our company. I think almost all of them in the last 30 days, because we're at a stage right now where we have established a task force that is developing what we call the way we work moving forward, which is not, if you notice, back to the office plans. And I think that's a big problem that I see a lot of companies say, oh, we're putting on our back to the office plan. Well, I don't think that's the right way to use it. There's power in your words, right? And I think you're telling people what you really want when you say, let's put
In the
together our
title of the
back to the
objective.
office. Right.
Yeah.
Back to the office plans. And so in our way we work sessions, we've talked about this desire to say, let's figure out a different way of how we develop our days. So this is a chance for us. This is a moment in time which we may never have again to say, let's develop a cadence and a methodology that works better for the creative process and for collaboration. Because we wouldn't be able to do this 2 years ago, and we may not be able to do it in 2 years from now.
You got to cherish your time. So what does first of all, what are you calling it? I mean, I would say it's kind of the plan moving forward. I mean, what are you calling it, and what is your plan, Gus?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of spoiling it for all of our employees because we haven't really announced it yet. But what our plan
Not too
moving
many are
forward
watching
is to renovate our office space and to provide more general meeting areas and allow teams to come in. We'll have days of the weeks where we have the entire company in the office together for the full day. There will be 1 or 2 days of the week that's what's going to happen. There'll be other days where they're just in with their teams working on what we're calling screenless activities. So let's shut down the computer, let's shut down your phone, and let's spend an hour solving the creative problem at hand and talking about it and talking about what we like and hate and all the different things that come from actual creative collaboration.
Tremendous.
And so I think that I think that's a big factor for us, is developing a new methodology that provides. I think screens have become intermediaries to a degree in the creative process. Oh, did you get my update? I put it on Trello. The due date changed for this, or the objective for this is now this, or oh, I added that in the Google Doc. I tagged you in it. That's not creative collaboration. That's just not. And so I think we've got to find a way to fight through that. And so that's what it looks like for us right now. We're looking at it as two different ways: changing our physical structure and what happens inside the physical structure by a task oriented way. So group sections, group meetings. And then we're also looking at our own personal how we work method.
That's tremendous. And you wouldn't have had this opportunity if it wasn't for the pandemic to really take a step back and say, how are we working? We've been doing it the same way for the last, 100 years of Adland.
Right.
Agencyville. How do we change that dynamic, and how do we listen? So what happens? I'm sure you're gonna have some folks that say, I'm just hypothesizing. I say, Gus, for whatever reasons, I just don't feel comfortable coming back into an office, maybe forever, for just now, maybe for a little bit. I don't know how long that's going to be. How are you as a people leader handling that and instructing your HR and people in leadership roles to handle these situations?
Well, we're taking it day by day right now. I mean, I think what can't be lost is we in the United States, we do have a really positive situation. But I think if you look at Great Britain with the Delta variant and some of the other things that are happening around the globe, I'm hesitant to say, let's just put this whole chapter behind us. It's business as usual. We're back to normal. I think we've got to be pretty cautious and iterative in terms of how we're handling this based on the data that we're getting. But I will say that it's not a very sexy answer, but it depends on the individual. There are some individuals in the type of work that they do that I would look at and say, well, if you're a computer programmer and you're writing lines of code a day and you feel like you're hyper productive in an environment where you can put your headphones on and you're not with 100 people talking around you. I get that. I could understand that. There are other roles that, as a creative leader, as a writer, as a designer, that your job is instrumental in the development of other individuals on your team. And so it's important that you be there for them, whether it's at the office or at a museum or in a park.
Gus, what has been the feedback from clients?
Well, I mean, I think the nice thing about this so far is that our clients have started to use Camp Paradowski. And so some of them have been unable to meet in their own corporations yet.
Interesting.
And so they've come over to meet with us. And then once they're there, they've said, would it be okay if we brought our larger team back for just like an hour or two, just for we could see each other and be together for a while? And so the response has been incredibly positive, just because it's, you know, 12 or 14 months in some occasions. That's a long time for not just an agency to go without seeing your coworkers, but all your clients. They haven't seen each
They're
other.
not seeing them either. They're not seeing them. And a lot of companies too operate like an agency, and that kind of
Right.
camaraderie too. A lot of people don't understand that team dynamic as well there too. And have we done any of the full client agency meetings on site in the camp?
We have. Yes, we have.
There's an energy there, the relationships, right? Like to your point earlier, you can't do this all day long with clients.
No.
There's something to be said about physical contact, and I mean, eventually get back to who doesn't love a good client dinner, right? There's a lot of value to that, and they're not just boondoggles. There's a real value to those conversations over dinner, drinks. That's real. It's real stuff.
Well, I think ultimately, if you're in the ad business, you understand the importance of relationships, and the same way that people say long distance relationships are hard, the same can be applied for virtual agencies. I think you have to have real relationship building things that happen, shared experiences, in-person meetings, discussions, whiteboards, like real human interaction is the only way I think to build meaningful relationships.
I'm 100% there too. And that comes down from an account management perspective. That comes from a creative perspective. You know, for the creative teams, really understanding the brand as told by the brand managers, by the folks that are the stewards, the shepherds of the brand, not just over Zoom, really getting involved with that too. And then account management. I mean, relationships are everything. I mean, otherwise you just turn into a production studio, right? If you don't have that, you're just churning out work instead of really understanding the brand and understanding the dynamics of it and those ins and outs, and with the brand managers really being charged with changing and their objectives.
Well, and Adam, I would tell you, I think it's been just as hard on account service as it has been on creatives in the last
100%.
year. Because if you're trying to build relationships with a client who is also at home, who's also trying to manage their family, who also has 400 other tasks, they have a half-hour video screen for you, or they might have a text or emails that you don't have the opportunity to sit in their office or take them to lunch and really find out how things are going. And so it's been a very difficult year, I would say as well, to try and build those relationships meaningfully on the account side.
I love it. And Gus, have other agencies, other companies kind of been reaching out to you and saying, hey, this is pretty cool. Tell us how you're doing that. How you spreading the word, the gospel of the corporate camps, the agency camps?
I've had a couple of other agency owners tell me I'm crazy and that they just want their people back in the office full time. But I haven't had a lot of people calling me asking to replicate our camp. I've had a lot of companies on the client side call and say, can we come use the facility, that are not clients. They just hear about it and they want to come over and get together with their friends and family. And I'm fully supportive of that as a human being.
I love it. Guts, this is absolutely awesome. Tell us a little bit about Paradowski Creative. What's your specialty? What's your bread and butter over there?
You know, Paradowski Creative, we are not going to be your hyper specialized agency, where I'm not going to tell you we're the best at any specific category. Our agency works across a lot of verticals. So we work as an innovation agency for Verizon for their 5G labs. We work for Bayer across their crop science, pharma, and consumer health. We work for Enterprise Holdings, which is the owner of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, to National Cattlemen and Beef Association in Denver, to just a variety of different categories.
Nice cross-section.
Yeah, I think what we tell people is we like to do work that we believe in. And we believe in the clients that we have, and we believe in what they're trying to accomplish.
And Gus, if your leadership here in building out this camp is any type of add to anybody wanting to work at your agency, what really makes you guys special? Why would somebody want to come work at your agency?
I think that our agency is an extraordinary group of people. It's not one person. I've worked in agencies that have a charismatic guy that everybody follows, sort of a
I worked at Vayner, man. You don't have to tell me.
Right. So that's not what this place is. This place is a collection of extraordinary human beings that do great creative work, but more than that, they're awesome people. During COVID, they developed a scholarship fund to support diversity and inclusion efforts at a local university collectively, and we raised over $100,000 for it. I mean, this is an extraordinary group of people. So I would tell people that the caliber of our work is awesome. We were nominated for 3 Webbies in 2020. And at the same time, the caliber of our people is even better.
Great stuff. Gus, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Hang with me here for a moment. Where could folks learn more about you, the agency, where could they connect?
Yeah, check out Paradowski.com. We did a different website. Most agency websites hide their people because they're so worried about the people getting poached or taken to other shops, and they don't give them enough information. We decided to build a website that provides Vanity Fair level exposés on all of our employees. And so you can learn anything you want about me or many of our other employees in our long form essays and articles about these folks. So yeah.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Check it out, everybody. Gus, hang with me for one moment here.
Sure.
This has been awesome. 2 really unique guests today sharing different perspectives about kind of what's happening on there. One from a career growth perspective, negotiating during the pandemic, and Gus sharing an amazing innovation as far as bringing people together, thinking outside the box and thinking outside. So appreciate both my guests today. Appreciate everyone following along live, everyone on the replay, everyone listening on the audio podcast that'll come out later this summer. This will be the last podcast live until July 19th. So taking a little hiatus, taking a little mental break, going to recharge the batteries, get some new ideas out there. We're going to switch up the format a little bit and bring you a little different look podcast live coming later this summer in the fall. Gus, I appreciate you. Hang with me one moment. Everyone, you know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Have a great day. Have a great week and catch us in July for another great episode of the Podcast Live. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.